Every hero in this show is a real person, a real kid. And this story, every bit of it, really happened. Our story today begins in the country of South Africa on a hot, sunny day in the year 2008. And to understand it, you first have to meet a man named Berger. Lee is a scientist, but he has one of the most exciting jobs a scientist can have. Lee is a fossil hunter. Now, if you don't know what a fossil is any preserved remain or impression of a once living thing. Fossils are like little messages from the deep, deep past. And Lee's whole job is to go find them and read those messages to learn how animals and people came to be. Now, Lee was looking for a very special kind of fossil. He was looking for the bones of our ancient relatives. Not humans exactly, but the creatures who lived long, long before humans, way back at the very beginning of our family story. Scientists have a special word for them: hominim. They're like the great, say great about 100,000 more times, grandparents of everybody alive today. And here's the thing. Lee had been searching for these bones in this part of South Africa for almost 20 years. 20 years! That's probably longer than you've been alive. 20 years of walking over hills and searching and searching and searching. But Lee had a brand new trick up his sleeve. He'd started using pictures taken from way up in the sky, satellite pictures, from a computer program called Google Earth. Now, he'd use Google Earth to spot places where hidden caves and old bones might be. And using those sky pictures, he found a brand new spot to explore, a spot nobody had ever dug before. And he gave it a name: Malapa. So, one day in August of 2008, Lee drove out to Malapa to explore, and he brought 2 helpers with him. One was his 9-year-old son. His name was Matthew. And the other was the family dog, a big, happy dog named Tao. Now, I want you to be honest with me for a second. Have you ever gone somewhere with a grown-up because they needed to do something, and it was, well, a little boring? Waiting while a grown-up does grown-up things, standing around, nothing to do. That was Matthew that morning. His dad was busy being a scientist, staring at rocks and dirt, and Matthew was 9, so Matthew did what 9-year-olds do. He wandered off to play with the dog. Tao went bounding away into the tall, dry grass, and Matthew ran after him, laughing, chasing, feet crunching through the grass under the big African sky. And that's when it happened. Matthew's foot caught on something, a log or a rock sticking up out of the ground, and Matthew tripped. Now, here comes my favorite part of the whole story, and it's the part that makes Matthew a hero. So listen closely, because it's not what you'd think. Matthew trips. He nearly falls over. And most of us, let's be honest, what do we do when we trip over a rock? We're a little annoyed, right? Maybe we give the rock a grumpy look, and then we keep going. We forget all about it. But Matthew didn't do that. Matthew stopped, and he turned around, and he looked at the thing he'd tripped on, because he was curious. He just wanted to see what it was. And sticking out of the rock was a bone. Now, Matthew didn't know it was anything special. He thought maybe it was from an antelope, one of the deer-like animals that live all over South Africa. Just an old animal bone. But it looked interesting. So Matthew picked up the rock with the bone in it, and he ran back to his dad, holding it up, and he shouted the 4 words that would change what the whole world knows about where we come from. Dad, I found a fossil. Berger, remember, a fossil hunter for almost 20 years, took the rock from his son's hands, and he looked at it. And I want you to imagine his face right now, because in that moment, the little bone poking out of that rock, it was not an antelope bone. It was a collarbone. You have one. Right here, under your shoulder. Scientists call it a clavicle. And this tiny clavicle, cradled in Matthew's rock, belonged to one of those ancient relatives Lee had been hunting for 20 long years. His son found it, in about the time it takes to chase a dog and trip on a rock. And there was more, so much more. When the scientists carefully dug into the ground at Malapa, a job that takes years using tiny brushes and enormous patience, they discovered that this collarbone belonged to a whole young person. A boy who had lived almost 2 million years ago. And here's the part that gives me goosebumps. When they figured out how old that ancient boy had been when he was alive, he was just a little bit older than Matthew. 2 kids, almost the same age, standing in the very same spot, but nearly 2 million years apart. The scientists studied those bones for a long time, and they realized something amazing. This ancient boy and the other ancient people they found buried near him were a kind of relative that no one had ever seen before. A brand new branch on the enormous family tree of humankind. So the scientists gave them a name in one of the languages of South Africa. They called them aw-STRAL-oh-PITH-eh-kus seh-DEE-bah. And the word seh-DEE-bah means something beautiful. It means wellspring, like a fresh fountain of water bubbling out of the ground. These ancient relatives were a bit like us, and a bit not. They walked upright, standing on 2 legs, the way you do. But they still had long, strong arms, perfect for climbing up into trees. They had small faces, a little like ours, but tiny brains, much smaller than yours. They were like a puzzle piece that helped scientists understand how, over millions and millions of years, our very oldest relatives slowly changed into us. And nobody, not a single scientist in the whole entire world, would have known these particular ancient people ever existed if a curious 9-year-old hadn't turned around to look at the rock he tripped on. So let's think about that. Because Matthew's hero moment isn't a big dramatic rescue, it's something much quieter. And honestly, something you can do any day of the week. Matthew tripped on a rock. That's it. Anybody could trip on a rock. But then Matthew did the special thing, the curious thing. He stopped. He turned around. He looked closer. He asked himself, what is that? Grown-up scientists later said something wonderful about this. They said, imagine if Matthew had just gotten up, brushed himself off, and kept chasing his dog without ever looking down. If he had, they said, the whole world might never have learned about these ancient relatives at all. They'd still be hiding in the ground at Malapa, keeping their 2-million-year-old secret. One little choice, to look instead of walk away, and Matthew opened a window into the deep, deep past for everybody. So here's what I want you to carry with you from Matthew Berger's true story. The whole world is absolutely covered in interesting things. Rocks and bugs and leaves and shells and funny-shaped clouds. And most people, most of the time, walk right past all of it. Too busy, too grown up, eyes straight ahead. But every now and then, somebody slows down. Somebody picks up the rock. Somebody turns around to see what they tripped on. And every so often, that person changes what the whole world knows. You don't need special tools. You don't need to be big. You just need to do the thing Matthew did. Stay curious. Look a little closer. You never know what's been waiting right under your feet for 2 million years. This has been another episode of The Kid Who, where every hero is a real kid. Everything in today's episode comes from true accounts of Matthew Berger's discovery at Malapa in 2008. Grown-ups, you'll find all our sources in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for another episode of The Kid Who.